Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be introducing the final panel of Cake 2013. Today's panel is sponsored by Comics Revolution. Fueled by the flash of comics and merchandise that sustains pop culture collectors and hobbyists, the Comics Revolution also stocks incisive, progressive, political, critical, and theoretical works, along with fiction, which once might have been called cult, but which any discerning reader knows is the canon of some better future. Comics Revolution doesn't just stock the best new prose and graphic fiction and nonfiction, whether in prose or graphic novel form. They help renew one's faith in independent booksellers. And our final panel, Intimate Anxieties.
Hello, hello. We're going to do a little sound check for a minute because I don't think anybody here is really that familiar with wireless microphones. So we'll figure it out as we go. I'm Caroline Paquita. I couldn't be more pleased to be moderating this panel. It's kind of mind-blowing. Researching these women, I've been very familiar with everybody's work, but in particular, like really diving into it, it's like a notebook full of notes. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but it could get deep. It could get pretty deep. Just to put that out there in case, gets like a little emotional. It could happen. Just saying, because we'll be talking a lot about death and sex and anxiety. 3 things that sometimes cause feelings. But also it could be pretty light too, because who knows? We'll see what happens. But so I wanted to start out with everybody introducing their work, just so for people who are unfamiliar with each artist, you can get a little glimpse into what they do. And when we go through it, it'd be great if everybody could say your full name, also for the voice recording, that's the tape, and where you live, maybe some background of your art practice, education, if you had formal education, or life education experience, and how long you've been drawing, and then we'll start diving even deeper into that. So first, we are going to hear from Heather Benjamin. And sorry, I have to pull this up. And we're going to go through her work, and she's going to talk a little bit about it.
Hi, I'm Heather Benjamin. I live in Brooklyn. I'm from New Jersey. I went to RISD for 2 years for printmaking and dropped out, and now I live in Brooklyn. Yeah, I've been drawing since I was really little. I wasn't always drawing stuff like this when I was really little, though. Yeah, I just had my first book published by Desert Island last year, and I'm working on a second one right now. It's just a collection of drawings, and yeah, I don't know.
Sorry, I had a technical detail issue here, but it was at the end of the slideshow. So we're just going to go through Heather's work for a moment. Actually, if you want to talk about any of these as they come up, where they're coming from and like what issues or
this is the cover of Sad Sex 10, which is a drawing zine that I've been putting out myself for the past almost 5 years. It's just like a one-shot, like one-page photocopied drawing zine. It's not really a comic. It's kind of just like vaguely sequential images.
Usually in a mini comic format, right?
Yeah. That's from Sad Sex 5, which is from a few years ago. It's the cover of Sad Sex 8.
I have to say, this one, I love the glasses with the nose. When I saw that, I was pretty blown away. I was like, I would have never thought of that, but that's really good. It makes sense.
This is just a drawing that it's going to be in my next book, which is just a collection of drawings. It's definitely coming from the same place, but I'm just not putting it under the Sad Sex title anymore, I guess.
Is there a title for it?
It's called Exercise Book. Exercise as in like exorcism, rather than like to exercise physically. It's another drawing that's in the exercise book. Also in the exercise book.
I'm liking these.
Yep. That's actually a spread from a mini drawing zine that I just put out for Cake. I finished it like not even last week. It was like 3 days ago. Called Teenage Vibrating Girl. That's available at my table, but that was a commission I did for someone's birthday, actually.
Oh, awesome. Happy birthday.
Yeah, this girl's boyfriend emailed me and was like, you should just draw her some really disgusting thing. And I was like, cool.
Whoa,
You're a great
commissioned
boyfriend.
by the boyfriend.
Yeah.
At that. Okay, I think that's the last one. We're going to show Julia Gfrörer's work next. Julie, if you want to start your
Hi,
intro.
my name is Julia Elaine Gfrörer, and I live in Portland, Oregon, and I grew up in New Hampshire. And I went to college at Cornish College of Arts, which is in Seattle, and I majored in illustration to begin with, and then I switched to fine art about halfway through, and I guess I ended up somewhere in between. Neither of those really fit me that well, but I ended up with a BFA in painting and printmaking. And then I didn't really start doing comics until I moved to Portland, and everybody that I became friends with was a comics artist.
Yeah,
and
Portland and Chicago, it's kind of like that.
yeah, it was really lovely, and I was trying to have art shows at galleries, but maybe it was just my bad luck. Everybody was really flaky with the gallery shows, and meanwhile, like, all my comics artist friends, like, anytime I did any kind of half-assed comic, they were like, this is so exciting, we love comics, let's put it in our project. And I was like, there's positive reinforcement. Well, it just changed my life.
Yeah, gallery people are not particularly like that.
Some gallery people are wonderful, but just not the people that I happen to be working with at this crucial moment of my career.
Right. It's, when you enter the world of self-publishing, things can happen a little bit more quickly and sometimes with
That's
a little bit
absolutely
more
true.
excitement, I've found.
Am I like incredibly loud? How am I doing? Yeah? Cool. Do you want me to talk about the...
Sure, yeah, we can go through some of your panels and...
Okay, well, this is a comic that I did for an anthology called I'm Not Afraid to Love. There was a romance-themed anthology for the Gridlords in Portland. And I did this 2-page comic based on the Knight of the Cart story, which is a very early Arthurian legend about Sir Lancelot rescuing Guinevere from being kidnapped. And it's just an extraordinarily beautiful story. It is my favorite story. There are a lot of different versions of it. This is based on the, I want to say 12th century, it is 12th century, Charité de Troyes version, which is the original, but it's influenced, I guess, by the Once and Future King version also.
Whoa.
It's great. You should all read it.
Take notes, people.
Take notes. I went to art school. This is a drawing that I did for a forest-themed art show that was at Compound Gallery in Portland with Angie Wang and Vivian Chen. And this piece is called Ghost of an Abandoned Child.
You have this at your table, correct?
I do. I have one print left if it hasn't been bought yet. It's a 3-color silkscreen print that my boyfriend made. He's an incredible silkscreen printer.
It's very beautiful.
And there are other prints on this same theme that I have for sale too. This is an autobiographical demon sex comic that I did for the, where is it out of? Serbia? The Kush anthology? Latvia?
Oh, Latvia.
Yes. This was in number 13, which is autobio-themed.
So this happened to you?
It did.
Okay. Demon sex?
He was handsomer in real life.
Okay. I love this one, by the way.
Oh, thank you. This is another one from the forest-themed show at Compound. And it is called Murder in the Suicide Forest. And I actually did a comic that's kind of based on this image, and it's going to be in the next Arthur magazine.
I know that it looks pretty blown out, projected that big, but if you get a chance to look at it, I believe it's on your Tumblr.
It is on my Tumblr, yeah.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can see
sorry.
what's happening here, but there's this woman dragging this man's corpse, and they're being spied on by these 4 silver-colored ghosts.
One up here.
Can you spot the ghosts? If you do, you win the prize, which is existential dread. This is a poster from the Hayao Miyazaki Art Film Festival that was in Portland last May. My poster is for a film called Only Yesterday, which has never been legally released in the US. I watched it by means that I won't share. And it's kind of an extraordinarily sad movie about a little girl who feels like no one understands her and then grows up to be a saffron farmer.
Oh.
39 Ryan Goslings.
I just learned who Ryan Gosling was recently. I'm really not in the loop, but I finally realized, like, oh, it's that guy. That's what, there's like all these Ryan Gosling gifs or something on the internet, so this was a good poster for me to see after I became familiar with who he was.
That was the inspiration for this comic. I don't really, the only Ryan Gosling movie that I've seen is Drive. People see this and assume that I'm some kind of Ryan Gosling expert. But I really was just curious about exploring the internet persona of Ryan Gosling and how desperately you would like him to be some guy that he's obviously not. No successful Hollywood actor will ever be a real feminist. That's just bullshit. That doesn't exist.
Oh,
sorry.
Is he supposedly a feminist?
Well, there's a feminist Ryan Gosling meme. That's the dream, right? He's so handsome.
That sounds
He's so
like
feminist.
an internet phenomenon. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know the guy. He could very well be,
It's about as real as beautiful corpse of a drowned sailor, Ryan Gosling. This is another image from the forest theme show. I feel like I'm taking forever. Did I send you too many images?
No.
Okay. Oh, Spirit Hand. This is a comic that I just finished last week about 2 teenage boys who love each other and play with a Ouija board and get more than they bargained for.
You will have to definitely look at this on her Tumblr. A lot of your work is on your Tumblr.
Yeah.
And it's pretty comprehensive dive into awesomeness.
Oh, thank you. This is from my comic Too Dark to See that came out in 2011, I think. It's a self-published mini-comic. It's pretty rad. It's about a succubus. I still have a few copies of it. It's the only book that I've not sold out of this weekend yet. So, this is a picture of a bumblebee with some sprigs of thyme, which is supposedly women would embroider this on things and give them to their boyfriends before they went off to war or something in medieval times.
As a beekeeper, I appreciate this, even though I don't keep bumblebees.
It's like an amulet for strength and bravery or something.
So, Phoebe Gloeckner, are you ready?
Yeah, sorry.
No, I know, it's all this work, just trying to soak it in. The whole weekend, trying to soak it in.
Yeah, and I'm really feel honored to be on this panel with these 2 fantastic young artists. Thanks, guys. Anyway, I'm Phoebe Gloeckner, Phoebe Louise Gloeckner, you said full name. And I've been doing comics for 100 years, since I was 14. I've always felt like I don't fit into any particular group. I grew up in San Francisco reading underground comic books, but I was too young to be part of that scene. And then I started doing comics way before alternative comics started, because that's my work. Do you like it?
We're about to get there, sorry. It's hard to hold a mic and work a computer on stage. Okay.
I forget what I was saying. I have to wait till a picture shows, then I know what to say. Maybe.
but oh, um, anyway, I started out drawing for most of my life, and what you see here, well, that's a drawing. Okay. Tell me when are you going to stay still?
I can stay still, yeah. Sorry, we had a
Okay, it's
technical
okay.
difficulty.
Oh, it's a tech. Okay. Gosh, I don't know what to say. It's just. Okay, so I was doing cartoons for all of my life. I went to undergrad. I studied some art, some French, and did like pre-med. Okay. Then I got accepted to graduate school to study biomedical communications, and I got accepted before I finished the last semester of undergrad. That's normal. So then I just never finished undergrad. So I have a master's degree, but no undergrad degree. Okay?
That's incredible.
Isn't that cool? All right. And actually, ironically, I'm a professor at the University of Michigan. And when they offered me a job, I said, I don't have a bachelor's degree, right? And they said, yeah. And they didn't care, but ironically, I just used that word before, right? It's familiar. They wouldn't hire me at a community college because I didn't have the bachelor's degree. So who the fuck knows? Anyway, I have a job, and I didn't always have a job. And I did study biomedical communications, which is medical illustration, because I was fascinated by biology, by science, by medicine, but I didn't really have a nurturing streak at all. So I didn't want to be a doctor. My grandmother was a doctor. I didn't want to do that. But, so anyway, right when I got out of graduate school, I thought, I went to graduate school at the University of Texas. I thought, as soon as I get back to San Francisco, I'm going to get all these jobs. I'm going to open the paper. There's going to be ads for medical illustrator in the classifieds. And guess what? There wasn't. And I was crestfallen. And so then, having been a punk rocker in the 70s and early 80s, I went to this publisher, Research, and the guy said, hey, you're back in town. You're doing medical illustration now. Why don't you illustrate this book by J.G. Ballard? I don't know if any of you guys know him. And so I did. They said, you can do whatever you fucking want, because we're only going to pay you $500 for 10 or 15 illustrations that will each take you like 3 weeks to do. But seriously, it was one of the most fun things I've ever done, because right out of graduate school, I'd seen dead people, and I had things in my head that, had to come out. And, it was an opportunity to do that. And so anyway, so this is one illustration, and you can go next.
Okay.
Or and there's another. I always used to think about that, and finally had an outlet for it. No, but seriously, I think my interest in medical illustration, it's like my comics are like kind of psychological. They're about people's lives and the complexity of it and the pain and all that crap. But I really felt like I was so in my head that I had to somehow know it was in my body. Like I had to have that same consciousness, like be able to imagine, my spleen, what it does on every level, from microscopic to macroscopic. And so that's why I pursued that field of study. And it supported me for a long time. I did freelance all my life until I got this teaching job. So, okay, this is my first book, which is actually a collection of work that I had done for the 20 years previous to the publication of this book. I have always done a lot of work, but I've never been really good at like advertising myself. So thus this book came out pretty late. It's not published by Fantagraphics. It's not published by Veronica Quarterly or anybody else. It's published by someone who doesn't even publish comics. So I'm always surprised when people have even seen my book. Anyway, it's called A Child's Life.
It's great. I have it.
Oh, thank you.
I got it.
Thanks. And all the work in it was done for comic books, just little comic books like Weirdo and Young Lust and stuff that came out of San Francisco, out of the underground into the alternative scene, just single issue things that I had a story in, and then 20 years later I collected it all. Okay. Oh, okay. Anyway, am I talking too much?
No, I think everybody's, don't worry about talking too much, everybody.
I do worry. Okay, this is not a drawing.
But this is based on the work you've currently been doing.
This is the work I'm currently doing, and currently, I say currently means for the past 8 years. I've been working on a project in Juarez, Mexico, right across from El Paso. I initially went there because someone asked me to do a story for a benefit book for Amnesty International. And I went down there, having never been to Mexico. I don't speak Spanish. I didn't speak Spanish at all then. I speak Czech. Mluvím česky. Je parle français aussi. But not Spanish. So I went down there just this like gringo bitch, you know, going around, being dragged around, talking to people I never would have met otherwise. Parents who had lost their children to murder, basically. And I was shocked because I have 2 children, 2 girls. And I was talking to men and women whose daughters had been brutally raped and murdered. I mean, in the most horrific ways. And I was looking grief in the face, and grief that couldn't be relieved, will never be relieved, and was fresh. And it just made my head spin. I did the story for the book, and somehow I felt when I got home that I just couldn't reconcile what I'd seen. I couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't incorporate it into what I was seeing around me every day. And so I decided that I would do a novel, and I started just going to Juarez like 3 or 4 times a year. I developed a relationship with a certain family and then their neighbors and basically a whole neighborhood. Not the whole neighborhood, but you know.
Was that first thing that was put out about Juarez, was that illustrated or was it in
No,
the
it was
same?
like this.
Okay.
And the reason I did it like this, what this is like, it's quarter scale models of people's houses and dolls that are about 15 to 18 inches high. And I did it because I was drawing all this, I was drawing people being raped. I was drawing people being murdered. And I had to draw it because that was experienced. So I didn't want to like not draw it, because out of respect to the people who are dead, you have to draw what they have experienced. But the thing is, when you're drawing something and you don't have a picture in front of you, your brain is acting like a 3D program. From panel to panel, you're just turning it around in your head, churning it. And it fucking sticks there. And it hurts. And I just couldn't stand it anymore. At the time, I was illustrating a sex manual, The Joys of Sex Toys. And they sent me all the sex toys, and they sent me like this set of butt plugs.
That was through Good Vibes, right?
Yeah, Good Vibrations. And
That's in San Francisco, for everybody who's unfamiliar.
right. And anyway, this one murder involved this girl bleeding to death after being impaled with a splintered 2x4. And I just got home, and I had to finish this sex toys book, and I was drawing these butt plugs. And I just started the line between love and hate, between sexual pleasure and just torture. I mean, it just all got totally blurred in my head. And my brain just kind of like shut off. And, you know, after not being able to work for a month or 2, I came up with a solution. I'm gonna use dolls. I'm gonna kill them. I'm gonna fucking shove splintered sticks up their ass. And then the next day, I'm just gonna take it out, I'm gonna wipe the blood off, and they're gonna be alive again. And so it was kind of this like, symbolically, I could resurrect these. I wasn't inflicting the harm. It wasn't like so much in my head. But I must tell you, it takes a whole lot longer than drawing. I had to learn to use power tools and sewing machines, and I don't know, it's different. And everyone asks me, why aren't you drawing anymore? You know, and then I feel bad about myself. Oh,
Well, I
I'm
know-
a piece of shit, you know. But anyway.
Here's some more from this
Okay.
body of work, by
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't have to talk anymore.
I know that I read that you felt like by drawing those scenes that it was like basically you were almost like a perpetrator.
Yeah, but I must add that I felt like it, but I felt like it for too long. You have to be the perpetrator. You're telling a story, you've got to imagine doing that, or else you're not going to understand the whole story. You've got to imagine being fucking murdered, you've got to imagine murdering. It's just a fact.
It's terrible how much you have to inhabit the story that you're in. You have to be every single character
You do.
and the witness to it and recorder of it. I mean, I guess that's such a tempting experience in a way, too, for someone like me who wants to feel every feeling and just put my heart through as many meat grinders as possible. And then every time I do it, I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? You know?
I mean, is there a concern with when doing work like that that you might be potentially perpetuating certain ideas or certain violence, or do you worry about that with your work, that it might be someone might interpret it differently than how your intention? Anybody on the panel?
Well, yeah, I've been accused of that. I mean, with A Child's Life, that book, and also with The Diary of a Teenage Girl, which wasn't up there at all. Well, there was this one instance where my book was taken out of a bunch of libraries in California, and someone who was running for office, his name was Gary Podesto, he was in office, but he was running for re-election. At some talk, he held up my book and he said, "This is a handbook for pedophiles, and it's in our public library." And, but the thing is, it's like there's this weird thing. Okay, if you want to do a story about a child being abused, or not even abused, a child just living a life that you wish it wasn't living, if you don't show the sex, if there was sex, if you don't show that, it's like you're perpetuating this idea that it's shameful, right?
Or that it's like an abstract idea.
Or that it's an
violence is
abstract idea,
and it's
right.
like
And you're
only
also,
doesn't really happen. It
And
might
you're also-
happen, but you don't
yeah.
know what it looks like, or
but
you
you're
couldn't imagine
simplifying it. You're simplifying it. Because, no matter what, we're physical, we're human, we have neurons. I mean, even somebody who's being abused is going to feel something physically. There's going to be perhaps even tenderness. There's going to be physical response. There's going to be sexuality. There is something about it that, and so it is titillating if you see that in a picture, but if you don't show that, you can't show the full complexity and confusion of it. It's not black and white. And
Yeah. I feel like everybody on the panel has varying degrees of like how I would say like the death sex kind of intersection, which is a very nebulous intersection of like different varying representations, whether that's like, I would say, Heather, your work is way more like visceral, like in your face. Julia, your work, I feel like goes more into like a supernatural, and it usually seems to be more historically referencing, like it's maybe not so much like to me it seems almost like in a fairy tale setting, even if I say that very loosely.
And
then
both of them
yours,
are very beautiful,
yes.
I must say.
I mean, everybody's work is totally beautiful on this panel. But, and then, Phoebe, your work is more in a, I would say, like narrative, kind of like storyline. And just, I'm wondering so in doing this kind of work, there's like a sense of vulnerability in drawing intense topics or trying to express that. And I'm wondering about everybody's process, like does that cause a lot of, when you're sitting down to draw and you might be entering like a questionable zone, like you're tapping into some into some darker place, like, do you like censor yourself at all with your work? Um, do you worry about like personal exposure, like that you're putting too much out there, that even if it is fictional, that people will assume that it's about you or come away with that? This is a lot of questions in one.
I kind of like gave up on feeling weird about having too much of myself out on the table, because when I first started drawing sad sex, it was just like, I need to get this out, like out. And then after like a couple years of doing it, I sort of like took a step back and realized that like so much of my like personal, so much of like my emotions and anxieties are like on the table for like people that I've never met, to just, people do assume that it's all pretty autobiographical, and they're right, like most of it is. And I feel like I've just kind of gone too far at this point to go back. But I also don't really mind.
Yeah, I mean, I read someone was like, "Oh man, she's one wild chick." You know, it's like,
people think I'm like
okay, that's your takeaway. Okay,
Yeah.
that's one way to view it.
people like ask me if I, or like assume that I'm like a total freak or something, like because of looking at my drawings, which like I just think it's bizarre that anybody would take like that away from it out of anything. Like, oh, she must be like crazy in bed or something.
I mean, do you think the knife going in the vagina drawing?
Yeah, that's so autobiographical.
You
Like,
do that every night.
No, I
right?
know it. You know.
yeah, it's like I don't know. That's weird to me, and it made me a little uncomfortable when that first started happening. And I was like, man, I don't really want all these like people I've never met to just think all these really like intense things about me. But I don't know. At this point, I'm like that's already gonna happen, and it's more important to me to get those things out anyway than like the positive of like getting things out and like connecting with people that like get it or whatever, can relate, is more important to me than the people that are like, oh, you must be crazy in bed or something. It's just like, I don't, whatever.
Yeah, I think people have read my work and assumed that I was a freak. I'm a freak.
Yeah, we're all freaks here.
Or that I was like a Satanist or a witch, or I don't know. All those things are true, but I'm so much more. I guess I just made like a conscious decision to not care, and when I am making work that feels too personal to me, and I'm drawing it and planning it out, and I say to myself, this is too personal, people are going to think you're a freak, what if your mother reads this? What if your ex-boyfriend reads this? Then I think, okay, you're on the right track. I tell myself that's a good sign, and that helps me keep going. I don't know if it's really a good sign or not. I just try not to think about it. What I would like to do is just strip my ego bare until it's just more and more raw. I don't know if I'm capable of doing that, but that's what I fantasize about doing. Right? Who doesn't?
You know, I just, people always ask me if my work is autobiographical. It's just, what you know, they don't realize, I mean, you know, art that is about an individual, I mean, it's not going to speak to you at all unless it's about everyone, unless it's about you. And you know that. I mean, who cares if there's a book about, I don't know, who's the guy on The Office? I don't know, I'm just trying to think of somebody, Ryan Gosling, or he's not on The Office, but
That'd be nice.
does anyone like Kendrick Lamar?
Who?
Raise your hand. Come on. Oh, just a few. You don't?
Yeah, I don't even. Who? What?
I wish my dick was big as the Eiffel Tower, 'cause I would fuck the world for 72 hours. God damn, I got bitches. Oh, you know that? It's in my head. Ugh. Okay, but anyway.
I don't know anything about anything current. I mean, I'm like, Phoebe, you're
Now
blowing
you
my
know
mind.
one thing.
Well,
This is someone now? Like, can I
Yeah.
YouTube this? And it's like, you know?
yeah, I
Hot
thought he was
97.
popular.
Okay, I'm on it.
Okay. But anyway, no, art is not about, Julia or Heather or Phoebe. It's not. You're not going to even like if it were. It's about you. And the reason it hurts so badly is because when you're making it, you're getting to something that is just it's universal. And if it isn't, it's not going to be good and no one's going to like it. So, after Jackson Pollock is dead, do we really care about him? Can we only appreciate the work if we know about him? Rothko, his paintings, they're fucking beautiful. You look at them and they make you just go buzz. Do I care if I don't know anything about him? No, not really. It doesn't matter anymore. When we're dead, our artwork will speak for itself or not. It's got to speak to everyone. It can't just be about us. And that's not something you will. It's about everyone by being honest about your own experience, because we're all human and we have so much in common, whether we realize it or not. Right?
So it definitely seems like between the three of you, there's a need to, through your art, whether it's intentional or not, it's trying to make a connection with the audience, trying to connect with that pain or experiences through art. And so that's almost political. It could be interpreted as like a political thing to be doing that, like to be actively seeking
Republican
out,
or Democrat?
independent,
Oh.
feminist. And I'm wondering, since we're all women here at the table, I would say traditionally in comics, it's like, well, most things, not just even in comics, it's like a fairly male-centric world. And there's not a lot of cisgendered males that are making work like this. If there are, I'd really love to know about it. And I'm wondering if it seems important to you to be making work that is female-centric, I think, and like reaching out to other women, and especially like younger
No.
girls.
No. No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. I think, before I identify myself as a woman, I'm a human. And, you have to get below the gender thing. You just have to be. And, I'm a woman, yeah, but, that's secondary. And I wanted to speak to anybody and everybody, I'm not doing it because I'm female.
Well, not
I'm
not
alive,
necessarily because
you
you're
know?
female, but that's just an extension of
Right, but
yourself and your practice.
it's not like I'm doing it for girls or boys or for anybody. It's just like a scream, like I'm fucking alive and I'm gonna be dead, and I know it, and this is life and it's short, and I just want to like feel it and let it be felt. I don't know.
I know, Julia, I read an interview where you're saying like that people need to like cop to emotions and feeling deep emotions.
I
So,
did say that.
Yeah.
Let me answer your previous question. I'm totally doing it for women. Almost everything that I do is, at least in part, a reaction against other depictions of women that I've seen and not identified with. There's this Townes Van Zandt song called Our Mother the Mountain. Do you know this song? I don't know if you wrote it. You have to sing it. I can't sing it. It's about a man who falls in love with a witch, I guess, and then she curses him. And of course, it's from Townes Van Zandt's perspective, like every song about a man who falls in love with a witch. And when I hear that song, I feel like the witch. And I know that men will cast me in that role, especially if I hurt them, even if I don't do it on purpose. Like, that's the role that's been created for me in the world already for me to just step into. So, and there's such a dearth of stories about women who have done that, who have been that character, or Bob Dylan's One More Cup of Coffee. You know that song? He's got a lot of songs about falling in love with gypsy women.
Yeah.
That one's very beautiful. But again, it's all about this guy saying, like, you have this weird magic life that I can't be a part of because I live in mundane man world, or I don't know.
But does that mean you're doing it for women or in response to that, and you're just correcting, whatever's the zeitgeist? It's like.
I mean,
it's a
I'm
correction, but it's
correcting
not
for like a.
for women. It's for.
I feel like it becomes for women when you start addressing those issues, but you don't necessarily that isn't necessarily your objective in the beginning, or at least for me anyway. Like when I first started drawing, the kind of things that the kind of subject matter that I still deal with, I wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna do this for like girls everywhere and like power to us or anything. But then once I started getting a really positive response from a lot of females about it, and I felt and people were like, hey, this is really empowering, or it's cool that you feel this way too, or that you could articulate it this way. Then I was like, huh, wow, this feels really good, and it's cool that we can relate. And since then, since that has happened, I definitely have done work where I kind of felt like I was rally the troops or something. Not always, but sometimes it does feel that, or I don't know. I feel like if you're addressing if you're a woman and you're addressing issues of being a woman and how women are seen or interpreted, or just femininity, that it becomes and you're making your work public, then it is kind of it becomes for women, whether or not you went into it with that objective,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I can agree with you in a sense. It's like Lolita. I hate that book, and because unfortunately I was like a Lolita when I was 14 or 15, with some Humbert who lived in my house, and it angered me because I read that, and it's so much from the man's point of view, and Lolita just seems like such a fucking Lolita, right? And so, and it's so much more complicated than that. I mean, things get so simplified, but yet I always felt like it was I just wanted to, I can't say, once you say something is for girls or for women, and this is what drives me crazy. It's like, you guys are not cartoonists. You're female cartoonists.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
I
female
keep saying
artists,
fuck, I'm sorry.
female this, female. I mean, I know this
Yeah.
from
Say fuck.
touring
It's
a
like-
lot.
yeah, I
It's
did.
you're
Let's say
you're a
it.
female in a band, or you're a
No,
female.
but it's
it's like
why
oh,
do we
all be in
need
it?
that adjective? Why do we need, male is the base value. Let's
Uh-huh.
face it, it just is. And I'm a female cartoonist. I don't
Yeah, it
want to be.
fucking
I want to
sucks.
be a cartoonist.
Every anthology that's women artists, it's all oh, and they're pretty, and
Oh yeah.
unless they're not.
and the cover's goddamn pink, and the title of it is slutty grids or something.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just a
Is that
sad.
for real?
It's a
Slutty
sad,
grits?
sad
No, I
thing.
made
Oh,
that
I
up.
was like,
That's inspired by
okay.
a variety of things.
But there was someone who came
That's
up
my
to
next
me.
book.
I don't know if he's here or not. The best thing that happens is when, a male person, as opposed to a female, came up to me and said, "Your book is so important to me because it made me understand." Blah 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 blah. He said something that was very eloquent and moving, and I couldn't possibly reproduce what the message was because it was too good. But that, to me, that's what I want. I want to get below this gender thing and just be understood.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I would
And-
say it's about sharing experiences. I think
Yeah.
it's pretty easy to get pigeonholed into certain modes, especially when you're a woman making anything.
I just don't know if that's possible. I don't. It would be lovely to be identified as an artist and not a lady artist, but my wanting that doesn't make it true. Everybody who meets me sees a woman first and a person second because that's the culture that we live in.
So don't let them see you.
Well, it's yeah.
This is a podcast, right?
Yeah, I mean it's difficult. I feel like a lot of where I come from is like a fairly um, queer-centric world of where gender can be very ambiguous, and there is a lot of like people actually kind of don't care about gender in the same vein of things. So in the vein,
That's lovely.
well, it's a bubble. It can be a bubble at times. Um, and so it's interesting. It's kind of like a dance back and forth between people who just accept humanity in the form, that you're talking about, Phoebe, of just being like, I'm a human. I want to relate to other humans, and that's it. And I don't give a shit what your gender is, just as long as we're like being real and honest with each other. And then coming into a world where if you are female-bodied and you are talking about sex, it's like, oh, of course, they're talking about sex. Of course, they're talking about menstruation. And it's like all these womanly things, which actually, or like the emotions would be feminine. And so that's why I think, in the art world and then more specifically in comics, it's like I said, I very rarely see work by males. I'm very open to seeing your work if you feel like you're tapping into some dark stuff, and I don't mean to sound argumentative either about it, but I very rarely see that depth in work made by males. And I think that's why when you are a female and you do it, you're like female cartoonists, female artists, they talk about death, they talk about sex, they talk about all the things that nobody wants to talk about. Um,
Yeah, but when you're alone with yourself, you're not sitting here thinking I'm female. You don't.
Yeah.
You're doing your work. You're totally connected to it. You're you kind of space out. You're nothing. You're doing your work. So at that point, it doesn't matter.
I think maybe men have less opportunity to consider sex as a source of pathos because because of the culture that we live in, sex is so much more fraught for women. Um, and in a sense, you make a choice between being sexual and being safe and protecting yourself. Um, that's a serious simplification. I apologize, everybody. And I think that it's not that men don't think about this, but I think they are given less of a framework to think about anything other than like, sex is great, sex is really fun, let's try to figure out how to get it, let's try to make it more fun. It's a source of self-esteem for you every time you have sex. And men know that there's more to it than that, but I think, sexual education, the feminist movement, those have given us women more language to talk about all the different things that sex can be.
I wanted to open it up to the audience and see if anybody had any questions out there, just because I know that we have 10 minutes left and there might be some questions for everybody.
Can I ask one from Phoebe and one from Heather? Would that be okay? Phoebe, how do you feel with all of your medical background and knowledge? Like, how does that affect the subject matter that you work with? I mean, does that make you feel, does that help you deal with it easier, or does it make it more difficult?
Are you talking about this Juarez stuff, the Mexico stuff?
Yeah.
I guess it makes it. I guess it makes it easier for me to understand wounds. I mean, that sounds simplistic, but yeah, I understand, I guess, the ways people die and what they might feel physically. Is that what you mean?
Sort of. I'm not really sure I can articulate that any better, so I guess I might just leave it at that.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. And then Heather, I was wondering, how you feel about like hentai and stuff that like that. Does that influence your work? Something that might be maybe have kind of a misogynist like
Yeah, it doesn't influence me really. I mean, I haven't like looked at it prolifically or anything. I obviously like have seen it and like know what the deal is with is hentai the way you pronounce it or hentai? Hentai? I don't know how you say it, but
Hentai.
What exactly is this?
it's like anime
Oh,
porn.
yeah,
It's
okay.
like super exaggerated
Oh,
and
yeah,
definitely
familiar with
really
this.
misogynistic
Yeah.
a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, I'm like pretty disgusted by it. Pretty much every time I see it, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Because I'm not first and foremost interested in just sexual images. That's not just like, oh, this has sex in it, I love it. You know, like some people seem to think that about me, and that's just not true. But I was really influenced by anime when I was younger with drawing. Really, just like Sailor Moon. I was like all about Sailor Moon when I was like 8. That's
I
like why
love
I started
Sailor
drawing. Like, I just like started copying Sailor Moon pictures obsessively. So yeah, anime definitely was an influence, but hentai not so much. And I kind of like try to stay away from it because it just kind of makes me feel gross, especially the like really like swollen boobs. Like that seems like such a motif. It's just like gigantic, like swollen, but it just makes me like, oh god, I can't. I don't know.
that's what I was thinking is that maybe the taking the negativity from it and kind of
Yeah, I think definitely like me
Separate.
feeling really gross about something like that or like disgusted by it in the same way that like I feel disgusted by like a lot of like mainstream porn. It is like one of the reasons why I draw like the exaggerated versions of things that I do is kind of like rehashing it and trying to like make sense of how I actually feel about it. So in that sense, yeah, I guess I would be sort of not influenced by it, but like riffing off of it in some way.
Yeah, I can definitely tell, like, when I look at your work, I see a lot of kind of like the, people in the images are kind of taunting a little bit with the viewer. It's like, oh my God, it's so crazy. Oh wow, sex, sex, sex. You're like, oh, it's kind of like this, there's often like the woman being like pointing, like, yeah, like, are you gonna do it? Are you gonna do it? In a way that's like in your face. And I've shown your work to a lot of people just to see that like, how do people react? Like a cold call, like they're not familiar with your work. What is it? And most people are like, whoa.
I really want to
Whoa.
start a Tumblr of just Heather Benjamin reaction
Yeah.
gifs, where
Yeah.
I show them the picture of like the vagina with the Groucho glasses, and then just record their reaction. I did that 3 times this weekend, and each time it was amazing. I didn't record it; I just showed it.
I condone you doing that completely.
All right, the authorized.
Were there any other questions, by the way? In the front here?
Hi, this question's for Phoebe. I have a question about your work in terms of your latest work. Have you shown it to the families that you've worked with in Ciudad de Juarez? And
Yes, I have. I mean, when I go down there, I bring pictures, I print them out and show them some stuff. And they don't know comics at all, and so they don't. And these photographic things, it's not a familiar form at all. They're really glad that I'm doing it, and I take pictures down of their daughter, and versions, and they say, oh no, her hair was this way, and so I kind of involve them in that sense. They help me make sure I got it looking like her. But there's not one book in their house. I mean, that's not what they do. So I think the fact that I'm doing it makes them really happy, but the actual form at this point is not familiar to them. So they like it, but it's kind of a mystery. Yeah. So even if I showed them my other work,
They just wouldn't have a context. to
there's no
even-
context.
Yeah.
Right.
To know.
And I have showed them, but I'm afraid they might just think it's dirty,
Yeah.
but maybe that's my fear. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there in the back or?
Hey, so I was thinking when you said, Phoebe, that you said you have to take all vantage points within the story, including the perpetrator, of course, in order to avoid being disingenuous to the work. As you take these roles, like especially the perpetrator, is your immediate reaction to cope? And if so, like, what do you do to cope at the same time as you get in these multiple vantage points?
I think also we have a couple minutes left, so if everybody could briefly answer this. This is a great question for everybody.
Well, it's scary being the perpetrator because you feel it can be pleasurable, frightening. You have to imagine whatever motivates that person to do it. It could be, you could feel absolute hatred while you're doing it. It's frightening. To cope with it, you switch back to the victim, and then you run away. You go watch Sailor Moon, or SpongeBob, or listen to Kendrick Lamar. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just sort of thinking at the same time because I've seen other writers who have to take those sort of perspectives too. They also, I've heard, some of them I've talked to try to avoid coping on purpose in order to say this is just how the story happened, regardless of whether I think it's scary or not. Like, do you ever encounter that?
That's kind of like, you mean to be disconnected from it, like a journalist or something?
Mm-hmm. Or I mean, if you're trying to portray the story, like in order to really get the entire story, including those perpetrators. Like, I mean, just sort of, has it ever happened to you where you just wanted to remove the idea of coping entirely just for the sake of the story?
Yeah, I've wanted to, and I've tried that, and then it just, to me, it feels like it falls flat. And so then I have to try the approach that felt more natural to me, even though it hurts me.
Yeah.
So.
Heather, do you have any thoughts on this?
I guess it doesn't apply to me in a super literal sense because I don't do a lot of super like narrative or like straightforward narrative work. So there isn't necessarily a perpetrator there that I'm drawing that I have to like think about while I'm doing that. But
I mean, there is a sense, like an implied sense of some type of action, though, that would happen.
I guess like the perpetrator is, what's like being implied, and then I don't know. I don't think I do cope with it. I think I just hope it'll go away, and then I just end up feeling like shit. I don't know. I don't get like a huge sense of. I don't like round off onto some like sense of fulfillment when I finish a drawing. I just kind of still feel all like twisted and messed up afterwards, to be totally honest. So maybe I should find a way to cope with it, but so far I haven't.
I think it's terribly irresponsible to look at a story where there's a villain and say to yourself, I would never be that guy. I'm incapable of being that guy. Like, there is a point to which every person can be pushed to do fucking evil things. And you can't pretend that that's not true. You can't act like that's not a part of you. And it's terrifying. I know that it is, but I wouldn't look away from that. I try to think about what it would take for me to commit something that terrible. And then I try to compensate by performing an act of charity.
Yeah.
It's harder, though, to imagine being something like an embezzler, at least for me, because
Totally.
there's too much math. So.
It looks like we have reached the end of this lovely, lovely panel. I have to say again, I have notes and notes and notes, and this is something I wish we had more time, but unfortunately, this is the end. And I want to thank everybody for coming out. And to these three lovely women.